Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to study Torah, to exchange thoughts and reflections with one another, to engage in these relationships of Torah, and thereby to perhaps write the next chapters in this great story we call Torah. This week we are in Parshat Ki Tisa, which is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 30, beginning with verse 11. I'd like to invite us all to go ahead and unmute at this time, and together we can recite our blessing for the opportunity of sharing Torah with one another. We share in our blessing together. Baruch
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'zechutav לעשות דברי Torah.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity of sharing in words, deeds, and relationships with Torah. So if everyone could go ahead and remute, I will go ahead and start by sharing with you the opening verses of our Torah portion. Again, beginning chapter 30, the book of Exodus, verse 11. And then I'll invite everyone to have an opportunity to share in the reading, and then we'll have a bit of focused study. And then I'll invite everyone to share in your insights and thoughts and reflections on this week's Torah portion. So chapter 30, verse 11. God spoke to Moses, saying, "When you take a census of the Israelite people according to their enrollment, each shall pay Adonai a ransom for themselves on being enrolled, that no plague may come upon them through their being enrolled. This is what everyone who is entered into the record shall pay: a half shekel by the sanctuary weight, 20 gerahs to the shekel, a half shekel as an offering to Adonai. Everyone who is entered in the records, from the age of 20 years up, shall give Adonai's offering. The rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less than half a shekel when giving God's offering as an expiation for your persons. You shall take the expiation money from the Israelites and assign it to the service of the tent of meeting. It shall serve the Israelites as a reminder before Adonai, as expiation for your persons." Jim and Peggy, would you like to pick up at verse 17?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Make a laver of copper and a stand of copper for it, for washing, and place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it, and let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet in water drawn from it. When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water, and they may not die. Or when they approach the altar to serve, to turn into smoke an offering by fire to Adonai, they shall wash their hands and feet, that they may not die. It shall be a law for all time for them, for him and his offspring throughout the ages."
Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Next take choice spices, 500 weight of solidified myrrh, half as much, 250 of fragrant cinnamon, 250 of aromatic cane, 500 by the sanctuary weight of cassia, and a hin of olive oil. Make of this a sacred anointing oil, a compound of ingredients expertly blended to serve as sacred anointing oil. With it, anoint the tent of meeting, the ark of the pact, the table and all its utensils, the lampstand and all its fittings, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, and the laver and its stand. Thus you shall consecrate them so they may be most holy. Whatever touches them shall be consecrated. You shall also anoint Aaron and his sons consecrating them to serve me as priests.
Thank you both so much. Richard, would you like to pick up there at verse 31?
Yes, thank you. And speak to the Israelite people as follows. This shall be for an anointing oil sacred to me throughout the generations. It must not be rubbed on any person's body, and you must not make anything like it in the same proportions. It is sacred, to be held sacred by you. Whoever compounds its like or puts any of it on a layman shall be cut off from his kin. And the Lord said to Moses, take the herbs stacte, onycha, and galbanum, these herbs with pure frankincense, there being an equal part of each, and make them into incense, a compound expertly blended, refined, pure, sacred. Beat some of it into the powder and put some before the pact in the tent of meeting, where I will meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. But when you make this incense, you must not make any in the same proportions for yourselves. It shall be held by you sacred to the Lord. Whoever makes any like it, to smell of it, shall be cut off from his kin.
Thank you, Richard. Margot, would you like to begin reading at the start of chapter 31?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. The Lord spoke to Moses, see, I have singled out by name Bezalel's son Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have endowed him with a divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of craft. Moreover, I have assigned to him Oholib, son of Abishsamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have also granted skill to all who are skillful, that they may make everything that I have commanded you, the tent of meeting, the ark for the pact, and the copper cover upon it, and all the furnishings of the tent, the tables and its utensils, the pure lampstand and all its fitting, and the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offerings and all its utensils, the laver and its stand, the service vestments, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his son for their service as priest, as well as the anointing oil and aromatic incense for the sanctuary, just as I have commanded you, they shall do.
Thank you, Margot. Steve, would you like to read beginning at verse 12?
Thank you. And the Eternal One said to Moses, speak to the Israelite people and say, nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout the ages, that you may know that I, the Eternal, have consecrated you. You shall keep the Sabbath, for it is holy for you. One who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does work on it, that person shall be cut off from among kin. 6 days may work be done, but on the seventh day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Eternal. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. The Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days the Eternal made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day ceased from work and was refreshed. Upon finishing speaking with him on Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 2 tablets of the pact, stone tablets inscribed with the finger of God.
Thank you so much, Steve. Mark Levenstein, would you like to read at the start of chapter 32?
Yes, I think I've unmuted myself. Yes. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him. And Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. This he took from them and cast in a gold, and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, "Tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord." Early the next day, people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and then rose to dance.
Thank
Adonai
you.
spoke,
Go ahead. Why don't you keep going? Thank you.
whatever you like. Adonai spoke to Moses, "Hurry down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way I have enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten calf and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.'"
Thank you, Mark. Gary, would you like to pick up there at verse 9?
The Eternal further said to Moses, "I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Now let me be that my anger may blaze forth against them, and that I may destroy them and make of you a great nation." But Moses implored the Eternal, his God, saying, "Let not your anger, Eternal One, blaze forth against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. Turn from your blazing anger and renounce the plan to punish your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, how you swore to them by yourself and said to them, 'I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring this whole land of which I spoke, to possess forever.' And the Eternal renounced the punishment planned for God's people."
Thank you, Gary. And Dave, would you like to read starting at verse 15?
Yes, thank you. And Moses turned and went down from the mount with the 2 tables of the testimony in his hand, tables that were written on both their sides. On one side and on the other side they were written. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God graven upon the tables. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, "There is a noise of war in the camp." And he said, "It is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry, being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear." And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot. And he cast the tablets out of his hands and broke them beneath the mount. And he took the calf which they had made, and burnt it with fire, and ground it to powder, and strewed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dave. And Mark Thompson, would you like to read beginning at verse 21?
Thank you. Moses said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know that this people is bent on evil. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us.' For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." So I said to them, "Whoever has gold, take it off." They gave it to me, and I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses saw that the people were out of control, since Aaron had let them get out of control, so that they were a menace to any who might oppose them. Moses stood up in the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come here." And all the Levites rallied to him. He said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put sword on thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay brother, neighbor, and kin." The Levites did as Moses had bidden, and some 3,000 of the people fell that day. And Moses said, dedicate yourselves to the Lord this day, for each of you has been against son and brother, that he may bestow a blessing upon you today.
Thank you, Mark. And Susan and David, would you like to pick up there at verse 30?
Thank you. The next day, Moses said to the people, you have been guilty of a great sin. Yes, I will now go up to Adonai. Perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin. Moses went back to Adonai and said, alas, this people is guilty of a great sin in making for themselves a god of gold. Now, if you will forgive their sin, well and good, but if not, erase me from the record which you have written. But Adonai said to Moses, only one who has sinned against me will I erase from my record. Go now, lead the people where I told you. See, my angel shall go before you, but when I make an accounting, I will bring them to account for their sins.
And Hashem struck the people because they had made the calf, which Aaron had made.
Would you like to continue, David, with chapter 33?
Okay. And Hashem spoke to Moses, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought from the land of Egypt to the land that I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I give it to your seed. And I'll send an angel ahead of you, and I'll drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey, because I won't go up with you, because you're a hard-necked people, or else I'll finish you on the way. And the people heard this bad thing, and they mourned, and not a man put his jewelry on him. And Hashem said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you're a hard-necked people. If I would go among you for one moment, I would finish you. And now put your jewelry down from on you so that I may know what I'll do with you. And the children of Israel divested their jewelry from Mount Horeb.
Thank you. And Sarah, would you like to read a little bit, beginning at verse 7 of chapter 33?
Yes, thank you. Now Moses would take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, at some distance from the camp. It was called the tent of meeting, and whoever sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting that was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise and stand, each at the entrance of his tent, and gaze after Moses until he had entered the tent. And when Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent while Adonai spoke with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud poised at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise and bow low, each at the entrance of Adonai's tent. The Eternal One would speak to Moses face to face as one man speaks to another, and he would then return to the camp. But his attendant, Joshua, son of Nun, a youth, would not stir out of the tent.
Thank you, Carol. Let me invite Justin. Would you like to read beginning at verse 12?
Moses said to the Lord, look, you say to me, bring this people up, but you've not informed me whom you will send with me. And you said, I have known you by name, and you have also found favor in my eyes. And now, if I have indeed favor in your eyes, pray let me know your ways, so that I may know you, so that I may find favor in your eyes, and consider that this nation is your people. So he said, my presence will go, and I will give you rest. And he said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not take us up from here. For how then will it be known that I have found favor in your eyes, and I and your people? Is it not that you will go with us? Then I and your people will be distinguished from every other nation on the face of the earth.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Jay. Would you like to read at verse 17?
Thank you. Adonai said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked. If you have truly gained my favor and I have singled you out by name, he said, oh, let me behold your presence. And he answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name Adonai. And the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. But he said, you cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live. And Adonai said, see, there is a place near me. Station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
Thank you. We're now on chapter 34. I'll share a few verses with you. Adonai said to Moses, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablet, which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of this mountain. And Jim and Peggy, would you like to continue reading at verse 4?
You, Rabbi. So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone, like the first, and early in the morning he went up on Mount Sinai as Adonai had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. Adonai came down in a cloud. He stood with him there and proclaimed the name Adonai. Adonai passed before him and proclaimed, Adonai, the Lord, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations.
Moses hastened to bow low to the ground in homage and said, if I have gained your favor, Adonai, pray, let Adonai go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own. He said, I hereby make a covenant before all your people. I will work such wonders as have not been wrought on all the earth or in any nation. And all the people who are with you shall see how awesome are Adonai's deeds, which I will perform for you. Mark will what I command you this day. I will drive you out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Beware of making a covenant with the inhabitants of the land against which you are advancing, lest they be a snare in your midst. No, you must tear down their altars, smash their pillars, and cut down their sacred posts. For you must not worship any other God, because Adonai, whose name is impassioned, is an impassioned God. You must not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, for they will lust after their gods and sacrifice to their gods and invite you, and you will eat of their sacrifices. And when you take wives from among their daughters for your sons, their daughters will lust after their gods and will cause your sons to lust after their gods.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Richard. Would you like to continue reading at verse 17?
Yes, thank you. You shall not make molten gods for yourselves. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib you went forth from Egypt. Every first issue of the womb is mine. From all your livestock that drop a male as firstling, whether cattle or sheep, but the firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a lamb. If you fail to redeem it, you must break its neck. Every firstborn among your sons you shall redeem. None shall appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor. Even at plowing time and harvest time you shall cease from labor. You shall observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and of the feast of ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. I will drive out nations from your path and enlarge your territory. No one will covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times a year. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the sacrifice of the feast of Passover shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
Let me invite Margot. Would you like to continue reading at verse 27?
Yes, I can't wait. This is so exciting. And the Lord, it's a wonderful story. And the Lord said to Moses, write down these commandments, for in accordance with these commandments, I make a covenant with you and with Israel. And he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He ate no bread, drank no water, and he wrote down on the tablets the terms of the covenant, the 10 commandments.
Thank you. And let me ask Steve, would you continue there at verse 29?
So Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and as Moses came down from the mountain, hearing the 2 tablets of the pact, Moses was not aware that the skin of his face was radiant, since he had spoken with God. Aaron and all the Israelites saw that the skin of Moses' face was radiant, and they shrank from coming near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the chieftains in the assembly returned to him, and Moses spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near, and he instructed them concerning all that the Eternal had imparted to him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. Whenever Moses went in before the Eternal to converse, he would leave the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, the Israelites would see how radiant the skin of Moses' face was. Moses would then put the veil back over his face until he went in to speak with God.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. I'm picking up on Margot's excitement and enthusiasm.
Oh, it's a wonderful story.
It's a very exciting story indeed. And so I'd like to share with you just a little bit of focused study, and then we'll open up for everyone to share their thoughts and reflections and responses to the Torah portion. And excuse me?
The exciting story of your life begin with Moses.
Yes, it's in a month, so we'll celebrate that in a month. Thank you. So I want to acknowledge that we are at Mount Sinai, and as Margot pointed out, there's this very dramatic event is happening at Mount Sinai. These very profound words are coming forth from Mount Sinai. So for this week's graphic on the study sheet, I have a painting that was inspired by another set of very profound words that were spoken on another mount. So this is a painting by a contemporary Mexican artist, Lalo Gutierrez, and he entitled this painting, "You Are the Light of the World and the Salt of the Earth." Now, those are words from the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus spoke, and I believe this is from Matthew chapter 5. So this is Lalo Gutierrez, is a primarily abstract painter who is very inspired by his Christian spirituality and seeks to impart that into his painting. And I picked this painting in part because I would like to focus a little bit on the theme of radiance, which appears in our Torah portion. And to me anyway, what Lalo Gutierrez has captured here is this brilliant red, rich red that borders the entire canvas. And then emerging out of this red is this brilliant yellow, representing perhaps the light, the sun, the power of the universe, however you want to think of it. And for him, this represents the light that he experiences, I presume, from the Sermon on the Mount. We'll see how.
It's like you.
Yes, if everyone mute for a moment. Thank you. Thank you. It's great. Thank you so much. So I've entitled this week's study sheet "To Be a Source of Radiance." So here is one of the curious and intriguing aspects of this very, as Margot puts it, very dramatic story that's happening, is that we have two sets of tablets that are brought down from Mount Sinai by Moses, and they are different. They are different, at least in their production, in their composition, in their inscription. So number one, we have the verse from this week's Torah portion. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was God's writing. So that is the first set of tablets. They were entirely composed, produced, and written by God. And then we have a second set of tablets, and that's mentioned here in chapter 34, where God says to Moses, "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets." And he, Moses, wrote down on the tablets. So we have 2 sets of tablets. One of them comes down from the mountain and doesn't last but a minute or two, and they are destroyed, they're shattered. And a second set of tablets is the one that endures. And the curious fact in the story is that the set of tablets that was completely constructed, composed, and written by God is the one that does not survive coming down from the mountain. It's the one that when it comes in contact, if you will, with human activity, with human urges, with human complexity, that's the one that shatters. It's the second set of tablets, which is actually a joint product, a joint work product of God and Moses. That's the one that seems to endure and survive. So it's a curious thing. You'd think that it would be the one that was just completely constructed by God, that would be the one that would endure, whereas the one that was composed in part by a human being is the one that might not survive, but that's not the case. So we're going to explore the significance of that, and then we'll see how this notion of radiance works in. There are, in our Torah, there are 2 descriptions of the revelations of what's called God's glory. And they have very similar language. So in number 2, it says, "The glory of God settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days, the cloud covered the mountain. On the 7th day, God called to Moses from within the cloud." The second description of the revelation of God's glory comes a little bit later in chapter 40. "The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God build the tabernacle. So we have here kind of similar language describing this presence of God's glory, but one is on Mount Sinai and one has to do with the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. The significance in Jewish spirituality between these two tells us something about how the divine presence endures in the world. God's glory appearing on Mount Sinai is but momentary. It is dramatic. It is spectacular. It is accompanied by, if you will, an overturning of laws of nature, where the Israelites heard the lightning, they saw the thunder, their senses were overturned. The second revelation of God's glory, the cloud covering the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, by contrast to the experience of Mount Sinai, the tabernacle was designed to be a permanent and ongoing experience, a permanent and ongoing, if you will, presence of God among the Israelite people. So Jewish mysticism speaks about two different types of divine and human, that through a bit of writing from the great Rav Kook, who was a great Kabbalist. He was a great mystic. He was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi in the land of Israel in the 20th century. And he wrote this, number 3. The redemption of the Hebrew slaves from Egypt required supernatural interventions, a divine rescue from above. The term there is Itaruta de Elia, an awakening from above. But the future redemption will take place within the laws of nature. It will emanate from the stirring of the human heart. The phrase there is Itaruta de Latata, an awakening from below. The Jewish people will rise from their exilic slumber, step by step, without overriding the laws of nature, so that even the beneficiary of the miracle is unaware of the great miracle that is unfolding. Then our future redemption will not be in haste, but will advance steadily, like the ever-spreading light of daybreak. So there's these two concepts. So these two concepts that we have in Jewish spirituality about an awakening from above and an awakening from below is what we're going to be playing with in the last couple of minutes of this part of our session together. So the awakening from above, which is represented in our story here by the revelation of Mount Sinai, is one that's initiated by God. It's spectacular. It's supernatural. It has the capacity to upend nature, and it impacts humans primarily in their passive experience, their passive reception of this awakening from above. The second one that Rav Kook is referring to, an awakening from below, is very different. It's one that's initiated by humans. It lacks the spectacular aspect that the awakening from above, that of Mount Sinai, attaches to it. It doesn't upend nature. Rav Kook speaks of it as occurring without overriding the laws of nature. It occurs within laws of nature. But it may not have a great impact on nature, but it does have a profound impact on human nature. The awakenings from above, from below rather, which are initiated by human beings, have a more long-lasting and transformative effect on human beings than the presentation of something that's given to them from above. So if you turn over, you'll see some of the impact of this, because remember, when we read about the radiance of Moses' face, that occurs not after the first set of tablets were given, but after the second. And if you remember, Moses was a partner in the design, construction, and inscription of the second set of tablets. And he comes down carrying this set of tablets that he has participated in creating, and his face is radiant. And here's our verse, number 4. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of testimony in his hands, he was unaware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with God. Moses here in Rav Kook's framework has participated, if you will, in an awakening from below. Moses has not been a mere passive recipient of something that's been given to him, but he has in fact participated in creating this second set of tablets. And as a result, it has transformed him within. He is a different being as a result. And he's not even aware of it. That's perhaps the most amazing aspect of it. And that, according to Rav Kook, is the true miracle. When we become transformed and we start living differently, we transform the world around us in ways that are miraculous, and we're not even aware that we're doing it. It's so natural. So this is what Rav Kook is trying to teach us, is that we have the capacity to be a source of radiance if we but will it, if we but participate in this divine project called the making of a holy nation. So with that, I would love to open it up and hear from everyone what you experienced during our reading of this portion, what jumped out at you and what fascinated you and what provoked you. So if you'd like to raise your hand, I'd love to call on you. Yes, Mark Thompson.
Okay, I'll share what provoked me, and it's the Hebrew, as always, that always troubles me, especially when we try to translate it into English. And so I'm going back to the part where God says, you know, you cannot see my face, but you can see my back. I've always had a hard time with the notion of God's corporeality, but I'm really having a hard time with the English translation here, because if you look at the Hebrew, it doesn't say back in Hebrew, it doesn't say give, it says acharai. You can see what comes after me. So why is there, and I'd be curious to see how the other translations handle this. Do they all say you can see my back? And if it means instead you can see what comes after me, well, what does that mean? And then my other thought too is this idea of radiance, is that it's almost like Moses' face is radiant, maybe because he was exposed to the radiance of God. And so it was sort of like being sunburned. I kind of pictured that in a way. So I don't know. I have a hard time with this notion of corporeality, especially the way it's translated. It's not consistent. I mean, if it's his back, it should have said give. But why does it say achore, and why do people translate it that way? That's what provoked me.
Good. So let me invite you to translate it differently. And what would it mean to you to translate the way you'd like to translate it?
I don't know. That's the part that I'm trying to figure out. I'm still teasing this right now. I'm curious to know, are other translations saying back as opposed to after me? I'm, just looking at everybody else's translations, if they would look at that.
In my translation, which is the Jewish Publication Society, it does say my back, but we don't need to accept that. Let's embrace the Hebrew. And let's embrace what you're suggesting, which is you'll see the after effects
Right.
of my presence. You'll see the trace elements of my having been here. You'll see the effects and consequences of my having been here. How does that sound to you?
That sounds good to me.
Mhm.
I can accept that.
Yeah.
And what that makes me think is that perhaps we'll see the awakening from below.
Tell us more about that, Mark.
Well, whatever we're able to grasp of God's presence, what's left behind is hopefully a better us, a better me, a better each one of us if we have a privilege to have that experience, or even strive to have that experience, and be awakened ourselves, and thus that awakening from below.
Okay. So what you've both got me to think about is that when you're face to face with something or someone, you're in the moment and you're just experiencing it. When you're dealing with the consequences, the after effects, maybe there's more of a time for some reflection and some consideration about what does this all mean, and you have it's not quite so immediate, but contemplative, and it's more considered. Maybe that's part of it as well. At least that's what you got me to think about. Let me have Mark and then Richard and then Garrett. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
If we are created in God's image, what is the after effect of our being someplace? What do we leave behind? What do we inspire in others? I think is something to ponder as well.
Tell me more about that, Mark. Tell me about a person's life and our reaction to them when they are with us, maybe in the presence of them, or when they're alive, as opposed to when they're gone, in one way or another.
I think all those things. I think of people who have inspired me, who I've learned from, and I think about what perhaps I've learned in the moment, but then also what I've carried on from that experience and what I've learned and how I've grown from it, and what I'm able to bring to the world and to others and to myself.
Thank you so much. Let me ask Richard and then Garrett. Richard, what would you like to add to that?
Well, this image of the back, as a kid and still now, there's this prayer, Tuvo Makadesh B'Kol Yom Ma'aseh V'Reshit. Every day, out of His goodness, God renews creation. Every moment, it's constantly, bush is always burning. But the image I had, the non-corporeal image, you couldn't see the face, but it was as though there were a huge curtain, a robe. He's passing the robe, and the bottom of the robe is clusters of lights flashing or feathers or something beautiful. And as it goes along, it refreshes the whole world. And you can see that God is always at work in the world. If you pay it, look, wherever you look, He just walked by, and that's what it made. And that's why I like the translation that Mark brings up, is that what comes after, and He's always passing through. So I wanted to say that my favorite line in this was 31:6. I have granted skill to all that are skillful. Wow. Everybody's skill is a direct gift from the Almighty. So everybody's got some kind of skill, just like we have deficits. Everybody has a deficit. And that, I guess, life is the search for whatever the skill is you have to bring forth at the moment when you're called upon to bring forth your skill.
That's very beautiful.
But I'm still confused about these tablets, because God wrote on the first tablets with His finger. Now there's these two more tablets again, and He said, I'm going to write on the tablets, but the second one He tells Moses to write all these other commandments. So what's going on?
Indeed. Thank you. Gary, share with us.
Well, I like Mark Thompson, I was provoked by a passage initially, but with Rabbi's help, that provocation turned into a blessing. I'm paraphrasing, but there's a part early on where God basically says Shabbat Shalom or die. And whether you take that figuratively or literally or metaphorically, obviously it's important to God. And I've shared this story before, but it was important to me, so I'm sharing it again. Early on in my journey back to Judaism, I shared with Rabbi that for Shabbat, I was apologizing to Rabbi because for Shabbat, all I was doing with my family was lighting candles and saying a blessing. And because my interpretation of keeping Shabbat was that there's really a lot that you had to do. And Rabbi just smiled at me and said, that's beautiful. And I realized, well, yeah, I guess it is. And so what that taught me is that ever since then, for Shabbat, I've done something, whether it is just lighting a candle or saying a prayer or doing something once a week to help me realize that that it's important to just observe that one moment. And I think that's probably been one of the most profound effects that Judaism has had on me. And I know a lot of times, well, when we used to meet in synagogue, everybody was saying Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. But I've often wondered how many of us, including me, actually did anything to honor Shabbat. So thank you, Rabbi, for helping me.
Gary, thank you for helping me so much. Sometimes this notion about saying Shabbat Shalom, sometimes that becomes almost idolatrous. It can become something that we think is transformative of us, and instead we are passing off our responsibility onto a phrase, which is what is happening here in Skull and Calf. They are seeking to forego their responsibility for the gift of this freedom and to use it well. And so they're investing this calf with what should be their power. And sometimes we do that with rituals and phrases. We use them as a way to absolve ourselves of having to actually transform ourselves through the act of observing Shabbat. So thank you very much for reminding us about that. Let me go ahead. Jay, would you like to offer something?
Justin and I had a chavrusa this afternoon, and along those same lines, there was a discussion about idolatry, and down to the point where a rabbi carrying the Torah around his congregation always wondered why a certain woman in the congregation was never prone to ever put out a siddur or her hand and kiss the Torah. And she said, Rabbi, to me, that's a form of idolatry. We're idolizing this object, and my only thing I pray to is God. Another rabbi said that the Western Wall had become idolatrous because so many Jews cling to it and consider it to have godly powers and godly eminence, forgetting that it comes from within. These types of conversations that pull upon it. I think that the thing that also came out today was that the people are restless. They're used to living in an idolatrous society among people who worship gods of gold, and this is the concept. It's a very short time that they've been told this God has no physical form, and now they see their leader gone, and what shall we do? Aaron comes up with a quick fix. Let's recreate a symbol or an idol. That didn't go down too well. But another thing, why wasn't Aaron particularly punished for doing that? There's no mention of him having any particular discipline or reprimand.
I was
That's it.
wondering the same thing.
So first of all, punishment doesn't necessarily have to be immediate.
Third generation.
It could be that Aaron experienced something down the road that was a result of what he had done. But let me also pick up on something that you just said, because this year, reading this week's Torah portion, I was struck by something, and I want to share it with you and see what your thoughts about it are. The Israelites say when Moses goes up the first time on the mount, they say, our leader is gone. Moses is gone. We don't know what's happened to him. Let us make a God who will lead us. Why is the disappearance of Moses cause them to want to make a God? Why wouldn't they say, our leader is gone, don't know what happened to him, let's appoint someone else to lead us? Why does the absence of Moses then trigger their wanting to create a God? So does anyone have any thoughts about that? Yeah, David.
Just to say, to me, the logical thing, the natural thing were then to say, Moses is gone. We don't know when he's going to come back, or if he's kind of going to come back. Aaron, you're second in command. Take charge. We want you to be the boss. And then Aaron turns around and says, ooh, I don't want to be the boss. I'm going to make you a golden bull calf.
Okay. So you don't read the text as the people's response to Moses' absence being, make a God for us. You're reading it as saying, Moses is gone, Aaron, you're in charge. Whatever you want to do to be in charge.
I'm saying that you could, if you read it as, well, the answer, the natural reaction seems to me, if you think of Moses as a leader, is to replace him as a leader. And therefore the implication of their reaction saying, make us a God, or an idol that stands for a God, is that they see Moses as something like a God, or something that stands for a God.
Okay. All right. So now, go ahead, Carol. Carol, go ahead.
So Mark wanted to know what other translations were. So I grabbed my women's commentary, which I haven't looked at for, I won't tell you how long. And because it's hard to pick out things, it jumps around, but the description of what is happening here according to this commentary is so different. Moses is the master alchemist. He climbs the mountain, hides in the cleft of the rock. He speaks with the philosopher's stone face to face. He holds the 2 tablets of prime matter in his hands. When he grinds up the calf into fine powder, stirs it into water, holds it up into the air, a brilliant liquid shimmering with flakes of gold, he creates a dizzyingly potent potion, a love potion, an elixir of life, a toast. We drink of it. Our eyes are open to see beneath the veil. Ki Tisa is not about frenzied idol worship, but the detailed description of a spectacular wedding feast between God and the people of Israel. God the lover, Moses the beloved, take a census of who shall be invited, and they make the long guest list, 600,000 and growing. Time passes and we find ourselves in the whirl of banquet festivity. There is dancing and singing, and in the very center, what seems to be a golden calf. But blink your eyes, it is the glittering pile of precious wedding gifts. High on the bima, under the chuppah of cloud, God presents Moses with the marriage contract, Ar Ketubah. I can keep going, But this
Well,
just presents a whole different way of looking at this.
It's really beautiful. It's
It is.
lyrical.
what
Yeah.
you shared with us is very beautiful, and indeed there is a lot of beautiful poetic midrash about this being indeed a wedding scene. And I do want to take a step back and just follow up just a little bit more about this notion about why the Israelites may have asked for a God once their leader was absent. And it may, because Torah is constantly challenging us to rise above our lowest urges and tendencies. That's something that Gary always reminds us of, that the Torah is here to challenge us to rise above the easy answers and our baser instincts. And so what may be happening here is that this is an unfree people who is not quite yet ready to embrace the responsibilities of now creating a nation. They want to be taken care of. They want to be just told what to do because that's what's familiar. They like freedom, but they're not ready for the responsibility that a covenant really requires. And so sometimes when this may be a story that's saying how we sometimes identify or associate our leaders with those who are capable of concocting something that is godlike. That the absence of a leader means the absence of something that is all-knowing, all-perfect, and all-guiding. And so when Moses, that's maybe what they think of with Moses, that Moses is the only one who has a link to something that is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-guiding. And therefore, when he's gone, they're not really looking for a leader. They're looking for that figure who has the power to concoct something that is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-guiding. And sometimes we act that way. Sometimes when we're looking for leadership, what we're really doing is we want to surrender our power to something or to someone who has the capability of concocting something that seems to be all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-guiding, rather than saying, we are the ones who have to embrace the responsibility, and embracing that responsibility is really what brings the presence of power into it. So having said that, I will invite anyone who wants to conclude with a couple final remarks. Let me call on Margot and then Susan. So go ahead, Margot.
What you just said, Rabbi, is extremely disturbing to me, because that has led people to follow some, granted, some good people, but some pretty evil people as well. Additionally, I guess I gotta get some water.
Okay, take care of yourself, Margot. Let me call on Susan. Go ahead, Susan.
So what you just said made me think there was something in the text that bothered me, and that is when God tells Moses to go back down to the people because they've made the golden calf. He says, hurry down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. And so maybe made me think that maybe there's two things going on. Maybe it's the people, as you say, looking to abdicate and to be led. And maybe it's also Moses being being the representative for God, that he maybe is considering himself to be too important. And so maybe it's a reminder to Moses.
And it certainly, there's certainly a level in which, yes, Moses' leadership and his own identity is rather complicated in the story. I grant that very much. Thank you. And Margot, did you want to finish?
I've mentioned this before in this class. I've known 2 women in my life who were goodness personified, and I feel radiant. And when I think about them, they're both gone. I get a feeling of radiance encompasses me when I think of these 2 women and what they did in their lives. Unfortunately, I haven't emulated them, but nonetheless, I get this feeling of radiance when I think about these 2 people.
So I think I'm going to end with emphasizing Margot's point here, which is that true leadership should have the capacity to have us experience that radiance, which then hopefully inspires us to want to radiate. There is negative leadership, which seeks to absorb all of our radiance and to leave us empty and subject to all kinds of grievances and errors and emptiness. True leadership is usually humble and usually it fills us up rather than empties us out. And so this calf was made by people emptying themselves out of their wealth. And true leadership should be that, and we will encounter that in Torah. True leadership should be that which fills us up with the radiance that wants to make a difference in the world, rather than creating and enhancing our sense of passivity and abdication, as Susan points out. So I want to thank everyone for your rich engagement. You filled me up with a radiance, and I hope that I'm worthy of all that you've given me to share it back out into the world. Thank you all very much. God bless you all. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Be well, everyone.